Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody whose former stepdad told her that he didn't like her as a kid. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
Yes, Sam and I are not professionals. We are not trained in any of this. So please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings, so hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love. All right. Okay. All right. This letter is honestly like a little bit long, but buckle up. There's so many things that I want to unpack in it. The letter is from Alex, all grown up, whose pronouns are she, her, and they, them, who is writing to us from childhood. I'm in my mid-30s and struggling with a family situation that I've just found out is about to resurface. Some background. My parents divorced when I was around 7, and my older sister, let's call her Violet, was 9. In general, I was always in her shadow growing up. She was traditionally pretty athletic, smart, and popular, even though she didn't really like popularity and really shied away from it when we got older. I was always a fat kid. I was a theater nerd. I worshipped her while she found me beyond annoying, and I struggled with what I now recognize as super undiagnosed ADHD, RSD, and anxiety. My parents split custody in the divorce, and my dad stayed in my childhood home while my mom moved us to primarily live with her in a cool neighborhood, walking distance from the store she owned and ran. 2 doors down from her store was a coffee shop owned by this guy we'll call Dan. My mom and Dan started dating maybe a year later. We moved in with Dan when I was about 9, and they were married when I was 11. Dan was a chef who owned a cafe where he'd wake up at 4 a.m. each day to make the pastries from scratch. He was a little rough around the edges, but he got along with everyone and was a nerd in his own way, like we had a full collection of those Smurf collectible drinking glasses thanks to Dan. Over time, as I grew up and we became more of a family unit, I learned that Dan was a sober alcoholic and addict. He and my mom definitely loved each other, but definitely had a codependent relationship. And at some point, when I was around 16, Dan had apparently started using drugs again, and he cheated on my mom with one of his employees, which resulted in a kid. My mom and Dan's relationship ended after that, right before my sister went away to college, and once I went to college the next year, they sold the house and finalized the separation. Dan's relationship with my mom and us was complicated, but I genuinely loved him as a third parental figure in my life. The first time Dan came over to have dinner with us when they first started dating, I was anxious, and at one point I went outside to occupy myself with looking for bugs like 7-year-old does. Dan came out and made a clear effort to bond with me, and by the end of the night, we had named a caterpillar together. A couple years later, when we had moved into his house, I was doing a Secret Santa for school, and I got the idea in my head to make my person a gingerbread house from scratch. Dan had all the supplies, and we made it together in his professional kitchen at the coffee shop, even though it took hours at night, and he was up at 4 a.m. the next day again. Stuff like that really felt rooted in a real familial relationship. When my mom and Dan separated, I didn't really see him much. He was in rehab a couple times. He sold his businesses and spent the money on drugs. He was a line cook at a crappy diner for a while. And at some point, he landed this great gig, which basically meant he was isolated enough from regular cities and towns so he wouldn't have access to drugs or booze, and that his job was essentially 24/7. Think like caretaker for a hostel. I didn't really expect to see him again, but I was happy to know that he was in a good place and doing better. So this takes us to the summer of 2022. I was visiting my mom and sister when I found out Dan was actually coming into town for a visit the day I was supposed to head home. So I changed my plans to stay a couple days longer because I was so excited for the chance to see him and catch up after so long. When Dan arrived, he seemed kind of wired and he poured himself a glass of wine. Noted. Dan's not dry these days. Okay, don't love that, but obviously not at all in my control. I had ended a bad relationship with an alcoholic myself in 2019 and had been working on my own shit with that. But the three of us hung out for a couple hours that night. Neither of them had more than a glass of wine, and in the morning we had breakfast before my mom left for work. Dan and I had planned to go to the market together so we could make family dinner with everyone that night. So we were still chatting after my mom left. He was still kind of wired, but not as much as the night before, when he suddenly said, "Alex, I need to tell you something." Dan then proceeded to tell me, as if it was the most natural and understandable thing in the world, that he was so glad to get to see me now that I've grown up, because when I was a kid, he thought I was a total bitch. That he had always liked Violet so much more, that he dreaded interacting with me when we lived together, that it was apparently so bad that it got to the point where he tried to leave as quickly as he could if I entered the room that he was in. I was shell-shocked. I numbed out. I shut down. I guess I dissociated. I felt like I was punched and I couldn't feel the pain yet. I truly don't know how we got to the end of that conversation, but I got myself into a separate room quickly and started crying and panicking. I packed my stuff and decided to leave now. Dan seemed confused as I left, but I gave him non-answers as I walked out because I could tell if I said more than a couple words, I would start bawling. I went to my mom's store and said goodbye to her while semi-crying. I figured out where my sister and her family were spending the day and stopped by there to say goodbye, and luckily didn't cry in front of the kids. Everyone was understandably confused. I drove 7 hours straight home, crying and hurting. Being a bitch was a huge sore spot for me for such a long time before this moment with Dan. As a bigger, read fat and tall girl in K through 12, I was often read as more aggressive and unpleasant than the smaller, skinnier, prettier girls. And I had resting bitch face for years without realizing what it was. There was a particularly painful moment when I was around 16 years old where a school friend told me that everyone in class thought I was a bitch because she was mad at me. She took it back later, but I still kind of believe it to this day. It took me a long time to get past the pain of that conversation with Dan. I was actually very proud of myself for finding peace and not letting it hurt or diminish me. But yesterday, I got a text from Violet. She essentially said Dan texted her asking her for my phone number, and she gave it to him and then realized after she should have asked me for my consent, but she was too busy with the kids and multitasking, so sorry. I felt some real panic at this as I realized, A, Dan had a way to contact me. We had only been connected through Facebook previously, and I had blocked him when I left my mom's house. And B, he was going to reach out to me. And this is where I am now as I write this letter. I don't know when I will hear from him. I don't know if I'll get a call from an unknown number and answer and hear his voice, or if he'll send a text, or perhaps he'll change his mind and never contact me at all. And I don't really know what to do if I find myself responding to him. I've practiced many different tactics. I think about letting him talk, then saying, I understand what you're saying, but this really isn't my business, so please don't contact me ever again, and hanging up. I think about screening unknown numbers for the rest of my life. So if I hear his voice, it's just in a voicemail and I can ignore it. I don't really know what I should do if and when the situation occurs that will make me feel good about my choices later. I don't feel like I owe him anything. I don't need the satisfaction of knowing he feels bad or wants to apologize. I definitely don't want him to use me for another 12-step whatever, which could be very well the case. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? The only thing I know is that I won't reach out to him on my own, but that makes me feel very passive, like I'm just waiting for him to show up and affect me, and I hate that.
All right, Alex, thank you so much for writing to us. I'm so sorry that Dan said that to you, that he felt that he needed to share that, and that it reaffirmed something that you've gotten a lot in your life, that you are aggressive or a bitch or hard to be around. It's clear that what he said was the exact right shape of a weapon to go into the most tender part of you, right? He knew, whether he knew it or not, but he said the exact thing to make all of the hard work that you have put into building yourself up and keeping yourself going. And, that thing just made it crumble. And I'm really proud of you for doing what you needed to do to get out of the situation and also to take care of yourself after the fact. I really appreciate that your letter isn't about how do I not believe what he's saying to me, but instead, how do I put up appropriate boundaries with this person who I can't trust anymore? To me, that speaks to the amount of work and care you've taken of yourself over the course of the last however many years and in this particular situation. So I hope that you are proud of yourself for how you've handled this and how you've cared for yourself. And I think Sierra and I would both be similarly in a place of a lot of unknown or a lot of fear around what happens next when this person tries to contact you. So I think we're going to offer you a lot of love and support and kindness, and to try and do what you are already doing for yourself, which is offering yourself what you need in order to be able to not believe the thing that Dan said about you, and some helpful support in navigating this next phase of what does it look like for you to heal from what this person has said to you. But before we do that, we are going to take a quick break.
All right, my darlings, welcome back. And a special welcome to my new best friend, Alex, the letter writer.
Sure. Yep.
I said earlier that this letter was really long, and it is. I mean, it's like a little longer than our normal ones, but it's not like abhorrently long, so don't feel bad about that. But I wanted to pick this letter because there are so many things here that I want to unpack, and just the general shock and awe, the audacity in this lived experience of Dan. I like just couldn't not address it because we get some scandalous letters here at JBU, and this one just like stood out to. I just hate so much of it, and there's so much that I want to unpack. So I'm going to talk for a long time now here. I've got a multi-bullet point rant about to go on. Number one, I think part of maturing and growing up, but not just growing up, it's maturing, because those are two different things. And I think this letter highlights it perfectly. But part of maturing is really realizing that the adults around us, especially in our youth, at a time in which our worldview is much smaller, our coping skills are smaller, we often put those adults on pedestals because that's the only world we know, right? Not only that, but we are given representations of adulthood in media in which adults are very much the saviors. They're one-dimensional, good dads and moms and step-parents and whatever. And so it's just the identities of the adults in our childhood often gets flattened out. And as we mature, we start to see them as a whole people instead of this one-dimensional person. And part of maturing is recognizing that despite positive memories we might have with those adults, many of the adults, all of the adults in our childhoods are inherently flawed, some more than others. And that can coexist at the same time as those positive memories. Do you know what I mean? And that there's nothing wrong with carrying them both at the same time, despite how confusing it can feel. That all being said, Dan's actions in this are just so immature to me. The fact that he felt like he needed to unburden himself to you about a lived experience that happened so long ago with a minor, with a child.
I can't imagine talking to like any of the, like my cousin who was like really annoying when they were a kid. Like, you were awful and I avoided you.
It shows me
no
how like main character his personality energy is.
Yeah, for sure.
And that his experiences, his emotions take priority to the rest of the world. It also reminds me what they say about alcoholics and addicts, which I think is very true, although very like a blanket statement. So take this as a blanket statement. That doesn't necessarily apply to everybody, but the idea of like your emotional maturity being stunted with your substance abuse, like not pointing fingers anywhere. Dan, this person is immature. You can't do this. You can't say this to somebody and not be immaturely prioritizing your own, not just your own emotions, but imagine like being like, oh, I need to unburden myself. Like, this is a good social conversation to have right now. Like, it's just so skewed in terms of like, man, you like keep working, keep working, buddy, because this ain't it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This ain't it. I see you
Definitely.
being, I don't know. Especially because I want to say this because you mentioned like your cousins, like, and I want to say this to our letter writer. Tweens are annoying.
They're so annoying.
I had to have a revelation. Like, I had like a crunchy relationship with my stepdad growing up, and in processing it in adulthood, I kept having to be like, well, I was like a selfish kid. I must have been hard to parent. I did all these, I snuck out. Blah, 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 blah. I was selfish because I was a teenager. So I only had a one-track mind. And then all of a sudden in my healing, I was like, I was a child. Of course I was selfish. Of course of course these are the tools that I brought. And that this other fully functioning adult brought the same tools as a child. Do you know what I mean? And so I want to say that because not to be like, yes, you are the annoying bitch that your subconscious is afraid that you are, but instead to be like, allow yourself to be a child. Allow yourself to have been that person who didn't necessarily know how to interact with the world in a whole way, you know what I mean? In the way that you know now, period. Tweens are annoying. And so that's like a universal fact. And the fact that like he had to, again, like unburden himself to you just shows me his immaturity despite his years, that he is, it's just so hurtful and so immature to me. I just can't even get over that. That's the first half of my rant. Do you want to jump in before I continue?
No, I want you to finish your rant.
Oh, okay. Let me catch my breath. The second thing I want to say is the more long-winded side, so buckle up some more.
I love it. I love episodes where I don't have to talk. I just get to sit here and like affirm, like, yeah, so true.
Well, so part one of the rant is fuck Dan, he's immature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part 1A is tweens are annoying. Let yourself be a child. You deserve that.
Yeah.
Period. Like,
well, especially a child too that had undiagnosed ADHD.
You're allowed to be unpalatable. Period.
100%. Absolutely.
And children are allowed to learn.
How much? Yes, and who knows of how much of his dismissal of you or aversion to you was because you weren't the small, perfect, quiet, demure little girl that he seemed to prefer, right? Like,
yes, exactly.
Like, add to the idea that, maybe you were annoying, but it sounds like beyond that, and you were annoying because you were a child, right? Like, to be clear, as in the way that all children are, right? But add to that, the ingrained sexism, the ingrained fat phobia, that he is probably not unpacking if he still thinks it's an appropriate thing to tell you how much he didn't want to be around you as a loud fat kid.
Exactly. And I'm hammering this home because I feel like a lot of times when we go to comfort someone or when we go to give advice, it's like somebody says, I'm afraid I'm unlovable. And we say, no, you're so lovable. You're so lovable. Or, I'm afraid I'm going to be alone forever. No, you're going to find somebody. But it's the more radical, more long-lasting healing is to say, you know what? It's okay if you're unlovable sometimes. You're allowed to be unlovable. You know what I mean? It's okay if you're alone. That doesn't diminish your value to me if you are not partnered or whatever. And in this situation, I hear this fear of like this self-fulfilling prophecy of, oh my God, I was unloved. I was annoying. I was being a bitch. And I want to say to the letter writer, it's okay if you were annoying. You're allowed to be annoying, especially as a fucking child. And there's just so much space being taken up by Dan's immaturity and his feelings that I want to say, not only was he inappropriate to say this, it would be okay if the things you were afraid that you were true. Do you know what I mean? It's okay if you were. That's what I had to tell myself when I was like processing my relationship with my stepdad. Like, oh my God, I must have been such a hard kid because I was selfish. I was selfish, and that is okay. I'm gonna grant myself that, whatever. Part 2 of the rant is I want to touch on your experience as somebody in a bigger body as a woman, because the way you have been processed by society is real and so harmful and so unfortunate. There's fat phobia involved in it. There's sizeism and there's sexism. because it's so sad that young women young girls are processed in the way that we view the world, in this way, because it strips them of so much. It strips them of the ability to just have a body, period. Isn't that crazy? Just having a body, just being able to have it's just so fucked up. And it strips us of our agency over just existing. And it strips women of the agency over your emotions and the ability to take up space in any way other than palatability and other than people pleasing. You know what I mean? Anything other than pleasing becomes the other, becomes angry, aggressive, bitchy, you know what I mean? Cold, not generous, you know what I mean? And that's unfortunate, number one. Number two, I was thinking about, so Alona Mar, if you don't know, she is a rugby player on the U.S. national rugby team. They got a bronze this year.
I know who this person is.
Super famous on TikTok.
She's big on TikTok. She's now on
5
Dancing
million
with the
followers,
Stars.
and now she's on Dancing with the Stars. Exactly, yeah. If you're on TikTok, you should follow her because she makes great fucking super hilarious
she's so
content.
Funny. Yes.
So funny, so talented and strong and capable and human, you know what I mean? She's multidimensional on her, whatever. I just think she's this is the celebrity that I want to see rise to the top of the world. But I've never really watched Dancing with the Stars, but because we're a rugby house, my wife is an ex-rugby player. We were obviously invested in the Olympics, and now I'm invested in Alona's career. So when I found out she was on Dancing with the Stars, I watch her clips. It's only been going for a couple weeks now. Okay.
I was like, are you watching the whole show?
No, I literally YouTube it. And before I continue, Alona is, like I said, a rugby player. She's tall, she's thick, she's got broad shoulders, she's ripped, fucking literally gorgeous. But she's on Dancing with the Stars, and she's doing fine and good and great. And I was watching the judges' comments after her week 2 dance, and one of the judges is like, "You're redefining what femininity is. You go, girl," sort of thing. And Alona was smiling, and I don't know if I just implanted my own feelings on her, but almost saw her face twitch when I heard that. And I was trying to sit with my feelings and being why do I dislike that? Why do I not like that comment that judge made? And I think it's because, calling on another person, expanding my tangent, the Alok Menon interview where Alok, a famous non-binary writer and activist, is asked, how can we non-binary people help your cause? And Alok famously said something like, "It's not how you can help me, it's asking yourself, are you ready to heal? Are you ready to accept, yourself wholly? And then we're not judging the people," or whatever. And so this is long-winded, but to the Dancing with the Stars judge, I wish she said, "Your existence makes me realize the flaws in my own understanding of womanhood and femininity, because Alona isn't redefining what femininity is. Women like Alona have existed since the beginning of time. Bodies like yours, to the letter writer, have existed and have been womanhood and femininity from the beginning of time. It is our own cultural narrow scope that has put labels on it, that has said that Alona is, quote, not feminine or is redefining the feminine. That's not fucking true. We are limiting, it's something there is infuriating me, because it's Alona's not breaking any molds. We're the fucking broken ones. You know what I mean? Our understanding, this is the rant I wanted to go on. And so yes, your lived experience in a bigger feminine body, to our letter writer, has been, I'm sure, plagued with people making assumptions over your value, over your personality, over your resting bitch face, or whatever the fuck that means. And that is our brokenness. And that is such a shame because we are not just limiting you. We are limiting ourselves and we're judging other people. And so let this just be a fucking angry, liberating rant that like, we're the broken ones. I can't help you love yourself more. Instead, I'm going to love myself exactly as I am and love all the bodies. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And recognize the ways in which the worldview, that you're holding yourself to has also caused you harm. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what Alok,
going back to the letter.
Yes. And I think that's what Alok Vedmenon is saying, is that like all of us are victims of this race or this gender binary, right? Like that we have all stifled parts of ourselves to exist in this thing. And we cling to it because we're like, this is the only thing that provides us, or if I'm doing this to myself, it has to be worth it, right? Like it has to have some sort of greater purpose. It has to be true. And I think what I think I find so disappointing about what Dan said to you is that it lacks any self-awareness around Dan's own worldview and what he missed as a stepfather by rejecting you because of your personality, right? Because of the size of the body that you're in, right? Look at all of the things that he missed out on in terms of being in real and good relationship with you, because he couldn't get past the fact that you were a loud kid in a fat body. And I wish that he could do the work that would be needed for him to recognize that he has caused harm to you, and he also harmed himself by holding these toxic understandings of you and the world. And like, it doesn't sound like that's where he's at, right? Like, it sounds like he shared this thing and is glad that you're like no longer annoying or something, which is like, neat. Thanks, Dan. I think all of this to say that like the issue here is with Dan and Dan's own healing journey, Dan's own understanding of the world, Dan's inability to hold himself and others with kindness, and has nothing to do with you. You are a collateral damage to Dan's own harm to himself and to other people, right? And the fact that you were an annoying 12-year-old is not a bad thing. It is totally understandable. And he probably read you as more annoying because of all of the reasons that you listed and the ways we treat people in bodies like yours. So if it's not abundantly clear, we just want to make sure that you know, and it sounds like you do, that this has nothing to do with you and absolutely everything to do with Dan and his own stuff. And he also has your phone number. So
yeah, okay.
We gotta talk about that too.
Now that my rant is done, I want you to help with like the literal practical advice.
And that is hard, because you're in this place where you're just
idea.
Like, yeah.
I think you should proactively block Dan because like this person doesn't need to be in your life. Get
That's
the
true.
number.
I wonder if you can get your number from Violet.
The sister, the sister has it. Literally, I mean, we could end the episode right there because that's what you should do, because this person has not earned a space in your life, no matter how much time that they spent in your life as a child. You don't owe them anything. They're
Absolutely.
on their own broken healing journey, as we all are. And like, not all journeys can be yours, right? Block that man proactively, because think about like, if you didn't know he had his number, he had your number, you'd be out there like living your life.
For sure.
Like thriving in your fucking awesome body. And
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what I would recommend for sure, is that if you really don't want to talk to this person, then like get his number from Violet and block him. And don't let him contact you. I think that's absolutely wonderful. If that doesn't feel like the right thing to do, I think what I'd encourage you to think about is what is your goal for yourself in this potential conversation with him, right? Like, I think for me, I would be like, I want to block this person so that I don't have to wait for them to contact me, right? Or I would get their number and I would be the one to reach out and say, hey, what you said really hurt me. I'm not really interested in further conversation about it. And I wish you well, but after this, I'm not going to talk to you, right? But the thing is like, what do you want to get out of this conversation? And if the goal is, I don't want to talk to this person, great. Let's figure out how to do that. I think we should, because he doesn't deserve to have you respond to him. He doesn't deserve to be able to just like come into your life unexpectedly. If the goal is for you to make him know how much pain he caused you, right? Let's talk about that then. What are the things that you would do if you wanted to respond in that way, right? Do you want to say, hey, this hurt my feeling. This reinforced a lot of things that I thought about you, or I thought about myself. I really looked up to you and thought that you were a wonderful, caring person. And it turns out that whole thing was untrue, that you didn't even want to be around me. And I can't describe to you how much it hurts to hear that. And I can't believe that you told me that. I can't believe that you thought that I needed to know that, right?
That's the line right there. I can't believe you thought that I needed to know that, you selfish prick.
I think the thing is to say here is that there's no wrong way to handle this as long as you're acting in with what I know to be true about you, which is that you have love for yourself, that you know your worth, and that you're not going to let this person undermine that worth with whatever he wants to say to you, right? And as long as you're holding that to be true for yourself, and from your letter, I know that you know that to be true. I know that right now, like, things are kind of shaken, that maybe the foundation is a little bit crumbly at this moment, but you know this, right? Like, you've said it to us. You were able to process through this by holding all of these things to be true. And so I know that you're kind of in this place of like, what's the right thing? What should I be doing? What's the exact right thing to say? How should I be preparing? And I want to say, like, yeah, I think that's understandable. And I think it's understandable that you would want to prepare for this. And I think you should if you decide to not block this person preemptively. But I also just want to name for you that there's no perfect way to handle the situation. And that if you handle it imperfectly, if you're not 100% prepared with the exact right thing to say that's going to cut the exact right thing, that doesn't mean that you have done something wrong. That doesn't mean that your healing journey isn't worth it, that it's not being successful, that you're not proving to yourself and to other people that you're worthy of being loved. There's no perfect in this situation. There's no exact right thing to say. The only thing that you can do is hold true to what you know to be true about yourself and your worthiness, and to help think about what is it that you actually want to do? What is the goal? What sort of message do you want to convey? Or what sort of values do you want to be living in and expressing yourself in, so that when you hang up that phone call or when you get that text message, you don't feel like you've somehow betrayed yourself in doing this work.
Exactly.
Right? So I know that's not really practical. I mean, I did give you a couple scripts that you could maybe use.
Yeah,
so
and I just yelled.
You could use some of those. Absolutely. But I think that there are options here. And I'm sorry that you're in this place where you're kind of waiting. Like, the waiting is so terrible. The like, are they going to call? Are they not going to call? Is he going to text me? What's he going to say? Like, that piece is just like really difficult to sit in. So I'm sorry that is the place that you're in. And I really hope that you know that Sierra and I have all sorts of faith and trust in your ability to be able to navigate this situation in a way that affirms your worthiness, affirms how deserving you are of love, because we know that you know that to be true about yourself. We just do. And so we just want you to know that we love you as well, right? And that however you handle this is going to be a good way to handle it. And we have all sorts of faith that you're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. All right, my darling. I'm sorry I yelled, but I'm not sorry because this is like the great unraveling, the healing, or the reminder, right? Your body's a good body. You're allowed to be annoying. You're allowed to be a bitch. And Dan's an immature child, baby, man, boy.
Yes, all of those things.
All right, darling. Thank you so much for writing, and we hope this helps.
Absolutely. We love you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like access to our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to those office hours, which is when we get on Zoom with anyone who wants to join us and we answer questions in real time, do a cute little fun check-in topic usually, and just really enjoy all of the amazing advice that our patrons offer each other. If you want to join us for our next office hours, it is on October 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central. Join our Patreon now to get access to that office hours. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DM, send us your favorite relationship meme, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need 2 random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and music. And remember, you are lovable even when you are unlovable. You are worthy even when you are annoying or cranky or ungiving. We tend to flatten people out to make the world more processable for ourselves. But we're only hurting ourselves. We're only hurting ourselves by narrowing our scope on what people can be, what femininity can be, what generosity can be. Yeah. And if all else fails,
just break up.